Revision lesson number 6, Pride and Prejudice. Good morning, students. Our next revision lesson is Pride and Prejudice, chapter number 6, page 45. Now, as I told you earlier, for a thorough revision of a lesson, we must first read the lesson. Read it aloud and attentively, pausing and pondering in between to understand it. Now, two things we need to understand as we go on with this revision. We have time constraints or limitations, and YouTube doesn't upload videos that is bulky in size. Now, coming to this, our aim should be to cover the whole chapter with the maximum number of questions possible. So here we go, straight away. The first question, from where is this extract or story taken? From the original novel, Pride and Prejudice. Who is the author or the writer? Jane Austen. To which genre does the story fall? The story falls in the comedy, or the genre is comedy. And in comedy, it is comedy of manners. Who is the protagonist? It comes in literary appreciation. Protagonist is the main character in a story, drama, novel, etc. Now let's turn over to the next page, page 46. Who came in to stay in the neighborhood? Mr. Bingley, a wealthy young man, had come in to stay in their neighborhood. Who was Mrs. Bennet? Mrs. Bennet was the mother of 5 young girls of marriageable age. What was the fond hope of Mrs. Bennet? The fond hope of Mrs. Bennet was to see her eldest daughter Jane getting married to the wealthy Mr. Bingley. Who brings in a letter for Miss Jane Bennet? A steward brings in a letter for Jane Bennet. To whom is the letter addressed? The letter is addressed to Jane Bennet. And who is Jane Bennet? The eldest of the Bennet sisters. From whom is the letter? The letter is from Caroline Bingley. What was the message in the letter? It was a request to Jane from Caroline to be present with them for a day, to dine with them, with her brother and the officers that night. So what was Jane? Why was Jane going? Yes, Jane was going. Was Jane ready to go? Yes, of course she was ready to go. So what did Jane request her mother for? She requested for the family carriage to be, for the family carriage to go to the neighborhood. Did her mother allow her? Or what was Mrs. Bennet's reply? She bluntly said no. She said no. She's not, she didn't allow. She said Jane would go on horseback instead. So what excuse did Caroline Bingley give to as a request for Jane for dinner? Caroline said that when two women meet together, you can see it's written over here, when two women meet together for a whole day's chit-chat or talking, it would end up in a quarrel. So she should come and give them company. Who should come? Jane Bennet should go and give them a company. Then in the next here you see the mother. Who is Louisa? And there's a mention of Louisa in the letter also. So who's Louisa? Louisa is the Caroline Bingley's elder sister. She was a married woman. So what did Mrs. Bennet talk to herself about? She smiled at the possibility of rain. Why was Mrs. Bennet all smiles about the possibility of rain? Why was she all smiling? Because if it rains, Jane would be forced to stay at the Bingleys and all night, and Mrs. Bennet was hopeful that this would be an opportunity for Jane to attract the young Bingley, the young man. So what comment did Elizabeth make? Why? Elizabeth understood her mother's scheming, and she said that it was a good scheme, as her mother was sure if it rained they wouldn't send Jane back home. So what did Jane wish to do? She wished to travel to the neighborhood in her father's coach or carriage. What excuse did Mrs. Bennet give Jane for not sparing the coach? She said that, here you have it, that her father would not spare the horses. Then how did Jane leave for Caroline's house? On horseback. You can see the picture. And then what happened a little after Jane left? It began to rain hard. How hard was the rain? Did it continue? What was the situation? Yes, the rain continued for the whole evening without stop and without intermission, that is without stop. So what was it likely for Jane to return? Why? No, as the rain continued all through the evening, Jane wasn't likely to return. How did the sisters feel for Jane? The sisters felt uneasy for Jane. How did the mother feel for Jane? Mrs. Bennet was, you can see here, delighted. She was delighted. She was very happy because her plans had worked so well. So we have completed this page number, and we have completed almost 30 questions. We move on to the next page 47. Here we have what arrived the next day. So a letter arrived from Jane the very next day. Jane Bennet had sent a letter. What was Jane's message? That she was very unwell. You can see here, very unwell in the morning, and her kind friends wouldn't allow her to return in her present condition. So what reason did Jane give for her being unwell? She said it was because of her getting wet in the previous evening. What else was written in Jane's letter? That her friends have called in Dr. Jones. So what symptoms of being unwell had Jane mentioned in her letter? That she had, here you can see, a sore throat and a headache. 2 points, sore throat and a headache. What comment did Mr. Bennet pass to his wife? So that if Jane falls dangerously ill or dies, it would be comforting to know that it was all because she was trying to attract Mr. Bingley, the young Bingley. So why did Mr. Bennet pass this comment? Because he knew his wife's sole intention about the girls and he disliked her behavior. So what was Mrs. Bennet's reply to her husband's comment? That nobody dies due to small colds and that Jane would be well taken care there. What was Elizabeth's reaction? Elizabeth's reaction to all this. Elizabeth was determined to go to see her sister. So what was the hurdle or the difficulty in going to see her sister? 3 points are there, +1. Although it was the neighborhood, it was a long journey. How long? 3 miles afar. Second point, the carriage or closed coach was not available. Point number 2. 3, Elizabeth was no horsewoman. That is, she couldn't go on horse. So, and the 4th point, it was raining. It was still raining. So, how far was the neighborhood house? We have already talked about 3 miles far. What was the name of the neighborhood house? Netherfield. Remember, Netherfield. What was the Bennet home known as? Longbourn. So, who were the two neighbors? Netherfield and Longbourn. People of Netherfield and Longbourn. So, these were the two neighborhoods. So, what was the only alternative left for Elizabeth? Elizabeth was left with only one alternative, that she had to walk. She decided to walk. Walking was her only alternative. And she says here that walking was her only alternative, and you can see here, walking was her only alternative and she is going to walk. And now here we see who objects to Elizabeth's walking. You can see the mother. Who objects to Elizabeth's walking all the way to Netherfield? Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth's mother, objects. Why? Because she will not be fit to be seen when she gets there walking. So why is Elizabeth determined to go? Because she was genuinely concerned about her elder sister. Who is Liz? Now here you can see Mr. Bennet talks Lizzie. So who's Lizzie? Lizzie is the pet name of Elizabeth, or the short name for Elizabeth. What did Elizabeth tell her father? She said that she doesn't want to avoid the walk. And what philosophical comment does she pass, or what philosophical statement does she pass? That if one has a motive, the distance or any such hurdle is nothing. 3 miles is only a small distance if it comes to your motive, if the motive is strong. So when did she say she would return? She said that she'll return by dinner. So in the following pictures in the drama, what do you see? We see Elizabeth wearing a raincoat and walking the long distance through via a shortcut. She takes a shortcut. She goes by the backside, back door, or the meadows. Through the meadows she walks.